a little dance music about to lay down the gauntlet. Here comes the ominous shadow of the tail of the field, races away, and she wins the Winterbottom. The Empire reigns supreme. Western Empire hasn't really moved yet. Here he comes on Western Empire. He's out after them. There is a brilliant victory in the Derby. It's Alaskan God. A magnificent win in the Karrakatta Plate. She remains undefeated now, the Siuni filly.
The stunning breakup of racing's hottest combination, the departure of iconic jockey William Pike, Chris Palm cementing his reputation at the top of the Jockeys Premiership, and have we unearthed a rising star of WA racing in Amelia's Jewels? And plenty of highlights out of the 2021-2022 racing season. We'll look back on the past 12 months and we'll project forward. And I'm joined by Digby, Beacham and Taylor Courtland from the Sports Daily. Good afternoon to you, gentlemen. Welcome.
Thank you.
And also TABtouch Scott Embry. Hello to you, Scott.
Great to be here.
Because we'll start off with you first. The domination of the Cerise and White was complete in the Group 1s, the Winterbottom, the Railway and the Kingston Town. It was a pure domination. Which race do you want to start off with?
We might as well start where it all started, and that is on Railway Stakes Day and WA Guineas Day, Scott, where we saw Treasured Star and then we saw Western Empire do what he did as a short price favourite after coming up with a favourable barrier draw, putting on an absolute galloping clinic.
It certainly was that, and it was the shortest price railway favourite in history. And if we go through the last 20 years, last 2 decades, average price winner, $9.50, and then enter Western Empire at $1.60. And if you were one of those many William Pike fanatics on the fence, if you'd taken that short price, you were never in any danger.
He looked a winner a long way from home, Taylor.
Absolutely. He did come up with a favourable barrier draw, as you mentioned, Diggers on Tuesday. I think we spent days and days trying to work out a way. Jules, that we could get him beaten in the Railway Stakes. Didn't happen. He trotted in, and it's a scenario we see all the time. Bob just places these horses perfectly. He won one race into the Railway Stakes, gets in with a minimum, and arguably probably the best horse in the race, and he's still on the minimum.
He has a tremendous record on the Railway Stakes now, doesn't he, Bob Peters?
He certainly does. He knows the profile of the horse that he needs to have to win the Railway Stakes. And this bloke, as TC mentioned, Scott, just ticked every box all the way through.
Something that we won't get a lot of chance to talk about in the future years, though, is Grant and Alana Williams and the grand final training nature that they have. Another Group 1 in the trophy cabinet.
Yeah, absolutely. They're renowned as the grand final specialists. They get the horses peaking on the right time, on the right day.
And the market just gravitates towards them as well, doesn't it, Scott? Or it certainly did last season. And the effort of Western Empire just set up what was an outstanding final TABtouch race.
Alana Williams, who have now saddled up the last 4 Railway Stakes winners, and that is Grant Williams' 5th. He'll go down in history as one of the greatest trainers, along with his wife Alana, in the history of this time-honoured mile race at Ascot Racecourse. First for home, she led
So Western Empire, a dominant winner of the Railway Stakes and probably an expected winner of the Railway Stakes. Let's progress to the Winterbottom Stakes and again to the 4, the Cerise and White, but an unexpected winner in Graceful Girl, Scott.
Well, all eyes were on Elite Street. Now we know that in the wash-up of that race, things didn't quite go to plan for him, and he had to suffer a disability after that with what happened in the race. But I think coming into it, we're all expecting 3 kilo weight swing in his favour for having beaten her in one of the key lead-up races. Graceful Girl, she's out the back, she's chasing. God knows what price she would have been in the run, TC.
Well, I don't think I would have taken any price, Scott, if you'd given it to me. Elite Street, even at the 400, I think it was chips in. He was just travelling up so well. But the turn of foot, I think the word that comes to mind, Diggers, of Graceful Girl was breathtaking.
It was indeed. Did you have an inkling, Scott, though, that she was capable of elevating in the manner that she did, given what we had seen from Elite Street 12 months earlier? There was a little bit of a precedent, but again, on this occasion, she had to take down the king, who was Elite Street.
Well, it's a pattern emerging. There's no doubt about that. We'll probably look at this year's Winterbottom Stakes and think, who are the informed ratings horses that can take that big next step? Will it be a horse like A Secret Plan? I'm sure we'll discuss that later on. But personally, being on track, one of my favourite wins of all time was Fedora. Wait for age in a Winterbottom Stakes. Move it to the side. Graceful Girl went probably twice as quick as she did last 600.
And the race, we spoke earlier about Bob and Sandra Peters dominating the Railway Stakes. Winterbottom Stakes hasn't been the climb race to Bob and Sandra.
No, it hasn't. And another thing that we have seen with this race, Taylor, is sometimes it's dominated from horses out the front, And sometimes what we have seen, Scott referenced there, Vidora, we see graceful girl horses who can just come from a position turning home. You think, gee whiz, I don't like to be on them, and they just blend in and just power away.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the last 5 or 6 years, probably the outlier is Haydock, who got to the front and then won. The rest of them, Voodoo Lad jumps to mind coming from the back. Graceful Girl did that in the Belmont season in the winter. She was winning a raconteur over the 1400 metres, and I think we were all sitting there thinking, where does she fit into the puzzle? Even at the start of her prep, she was a winner first up on the way to the Winterbottom. You thought, Winterbottom, well, I'm not too sure. But she put those doubts to mind pretty soon.
So just before we leave Graceful Girl and the Winterbottom, is that a career peak, or can she elevate again?
Oh, she may well be able to elevate again, Jules, but it certainly was a career peak, absolutely was, but you wouldn't put anything past her.
Second from Elite Street, and in fourth placing, number 4 in Labour Rod. Now too close to the sun, it'll straighten up in front.
And the clean sweep for Bob and Sandra Peters and Grant and Alana Williams was the Kingston Town with Regal Power and TC. Western Empire went into the race as one of the shortest price favourites, and Regal Power went under the radar.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we'll touch on Western Empire very shortly. But Regal Power, an All-Star Mile, a winner of more than $4 million, has won a Railway Stakes, won a WA Derby, but I'd argue maybe that Kingston Town was probably the best performance of his career after the 18 months leading up, Scott. He had injury after injury, prep, stopped, 1 or 2 runs, but to see him back at his best was absolutely outstanding.
A Quinella for Grant and Alana Williams in a Wake for Age Group 1 feature. It doesn't get any better than that from them from a personal perspective. But I'm sure as much as they were very, very happy that Regal Power won, and what a wonderful training performance to get him back to his absolute best, I'm sure at the same time, Digby, they were probably somewhat heartbroken, like many a punter on course, that Western Empire had to endure the run that he did and didn't quite get the job done as brave as he was in defeat.
That's the thing. He was entitled to put the white flag up, wasn't he, given the run that he had to endure. Boy, oh boy, he was brave, but Regal Power, as was so often seen with William Pike riding so many horses, was able to wait. And on this occasion, it was Patrick Carberry who bided his time, pressed the button at the appropriate stage, and he was able to get hold of Western Empire late. I'm with TC. This is a super training performance from Grant and Alana, and clearly a superior animal who's had his issues. He's campaigned in Melbourne. Some campaigns over there have been profitable, others have been frustrating. Comes home, and all the way through, he'd prepped up nicely, but he just went to another level. It was an outstanding win.
The build-up to the race was really interesting too, following on the back of his performance in the Railway Stakes, but he went around at such short price that you couldn't think of any horse that could beat Western Empire. And then Pat Carberry was the beneficiary of William Pike, who had the choice of Regal Power or Western Empire. Just the build-up to the race was fascinating as well.
It was, and you couldn't begrudge William Pike electing to ride Western Empire, given how dominant he had been in the Railway Stakes a fortnight earlier.
I think most will agree. You run that race 9 times and he gets even luck. He wins by probably over a length, but it's racing. He didn't get the even luck, but it also marked the re-emergence of Paddy Carberry in a later stage of his career, and as he went on a feature race spree, really.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll touch on that a little bit later, Scotty, but we should touch on the dominance of Grant and Alana Williams and Bob and Sandra Peters. 3 Group 1s. It's an amazing achievement. It's an amazing feat.
Exactly right, Jules. And I think people were envisaging that they would be very, very prominent in the TABtouch Masters, given the lack of interstate representation, TC, but that exceeded their own expectations.
Well, I think the reason why Bob, Sandra, Willie Pike, Grant and Alana, if you talk to anyone that follows racing on the East Coast, they're the names that they're going to bring up. They're synonymous with WA racing, and they had their moment in the sun too.
1, 7, 9 and 4, Regal Power, the winner. The favourite, still about 7 or 8 from them here at the top of the straight, but Carberry hasn't moved on her.
Also, the Cerise and White of Bob and Sandra Peters and Grant and Alana Williams dominate the Ascot Summer Carnival, the Masters, as it was called then, with the clean sweep of the Group 1s. Then we get to the autumn, and we potentially have unearthed one of the next rising stars of WA and potentially Australian racing after the Karrakatta Plate win of Amelia's Jewel Diggers.
Yeah, she was dominant, wasn't she, Jules? And a lot of the data and ratings boffins regard some of her performances. Indeed, that Karrakatta Plate performance, Scott, as inside the top 10 and well inside the top 10. She was awesome on grand final day for her.
Well, I think Dan O'Sullivan's ratings bureau was top 5 for all 2-year-old performances of the entire season, and very few would have come from WA in historical years. I mean, we're thinking about previous 2-year-olds of the year, Tin Snip, we're talking about horses like Export Man, and And the question is always, do they come back as 3-year-olds? But I think we go into this season with a fair bit of confidence, TC, that she can be the exception to the rule and really return with that same boom that she left with.
Absolutely. Brendan suggests that she'll get even better over 1600 metres. How they map out a preparation this season for her will be very much interesting. I think it was a funny 2-year-old season because all the way up to maybe the supremacy, we were waiting, have we got a good 2-year-old? What's a 2-year-old crop look like? She's a belter was good, but probably has even progressed since then. And then Amelia Strill, the trial, I think it was 2 weeks out from the supremacy, we sat back and said, hang on, maybe we found her. I think she even shorted the Karrakatta plate markets before she even had a race start.
Were you worried about the barrier draw of the Karrakatta plate, Scotty, when she drew right?
I think we're all at least interested. I think we were excited to see what is Top Gear. I know we're probably in agreement. Did we see it? It's a question, possibly not. And it was a day where we're leading into that Karrakatta plate. We hadn't seen a back marker all day.
No, and they often go hard, don't they, in those sort of races? And it's set up beautifully for her. And she just crunched through her gears and she was able to put away that opposition with an absolute minimum. It was just awesome. It was really, really explosive.
From Bumbasina, trained by Simon Miller, whose stable comes up with a treble, all running race to race. Northeast Eagle at the 500 here in the Derby. They come to the home turn.
And the final race we will look at is the WA Derby, the WATC Derby in Scott. It was won by a horse called Alaskan God. It's on a plain God from the yard of Dan Morton. And Dan just quietly took him through his grades, but come grand final day, Alaskan God performed quite magnificently and again stamped his credentials as a promising stay. And Dan did say early doors that if he was ever to find a Melbourne Cup horse, I know he may be a little bit flippant, but this could be the one.
Certainly maybe a year too soon for him now, but time next year we might be talking about that. We've talked about Railway Stakes horses and having WATC Derby form. Regal Power, a Derby winner. Also Western Empire, a Derby winner. Does he follow a similar path? And to think that it was only 2.5 months out of a maiden win down at Pinjarra Park into a WATC Derby, he's all X Factor.
And there was that Sunday afternoon here, wasn't there, when he beat up on those older horses. And then after that you thought, oh, okay, this will be interesting. And Dan did, I suppose, take a different route to the Derby as opposed to the traditional one.
Before he beat up on them that day, he took on the older horses in a Class 1 here, I think it was on a Wednesday, and he beat Big Swoop from Ray Malpass's yard, who was coming out of a Carnarvon campaign.
I think that was the day that Class 1, he sort of crabbed around the corner a little bit, and he was a little bit green around the corner, and he still hit the line in that final furlong, and you thought there's still a little bit more to come for this horse. I probably didn't see as much to come as there was. In the end, he was a dominant winner in the Derby, and he only got stronger the further the race went, but looking forward to seeing this horse back.
And the yard of Dan was just absolutely flying. It's reflective of Dan's form in the past 12 months. Can we touch on 2 tricks of the trade out of the WA Derby?
Yeah, had no luck and had a wonderful campaign as a 3-year-old, it must be said. Scott, throughout that autumn, he was racing in races and you thought, okay, well, we'll see how he goes the next time. And he kept raising the bar and he kept jumping over the bar. It was a really, really good campaign.
Well, Breeders' Classic, Challenge Stakes, Lex Piper, and then finally tasted defeat in the JC Roberts at the hand of Rockanori. So he had a wonderful preparation, tricks of the trade, and he will obviously come back this season and be just as good.
He's won the Derby by 3 1/4, giving them a head start. A length and a quarter, second and third.